Okay, I kind of want to say this right off the bat, so I can go ahead and get this out of the way. So when it comes to our coverage over Heroes Reborn, it might go a tad bit different, and it might take us a tad bit a while to get through all the different books. But let me explain. You see, we already covered issues number 1 through 5 for Captain America, and here's the reason why. Because the reading order requires you to go ahead and read all 5 issues at once. But when it comes to Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and Avengers, you might have to read like the first 2 issues of Fantastic Four and then jump over to the Avengers, and then jump over to Iron Man, and then back to Avengers, and then back over to Fantastic Four. It goes all over the place. But the thing is, that's how it's done when it came to the reading order for this pocket dimension that was created by Marvel right after Onslaught. And so today's video, we're only covering the first 2 issues of the Fantastic Four. Now, just in case we have anybody just joining our coverage over Heroes Reborn, I kind of want to explain like what Heroes Reborn is all about. So when it came to Marvel Comics, right, in the late 1990s, they were kind of struggling. Not kind of, they were big time struggling. But some of their properties were no longer selling. Iron Man, Avengers, and Fantastic Four. Now, when it came to those properties, you had Marvel say, why not go ahead, take those characters and move them over into a pocket dimension and basically give those characters a fresh start, a fresh beginning, and bring in people that fans want to see work on those characters, like Jim Lee on Fantastic Four. And so with that being said, you got Heroes Reborn. It was an all new, fresh beginning, a reboot basically. And so when it comes to our coverage over this series right here, it takes place in that pocket dimension. And so in the opening pages of the storyline, it's really more of us seeing Jim Lee kind of foreshadowing what's to come down the road in this opening issue of his work on Fantastic Four, where it's basically Ben Grimm right now having this dream where, of course, it's him and the other members of Fantastic Four right now out in space. And of course, there is this incident where, of course, it leads to them getting their powers. Now, we don't see them getting their powers in this opening page, but it's kind of like hinting that this right here is going to happen by the end of this issue, and of course, give birth to the Fantastic Four. And so once you do have Ben Grimm wake up from his dream, this begins the process of us learning more about the characters we might fall in love with. So, for example, when it comes to Ben Grimm, we do learn here that he is a pilot. And matter of fact, he's getting ready for a big space mission that his best friend is the current lead on. And of course, that would be Reed Richards. Now for Reed, he's right now currently working on a space mission called Excelsior, where the spacecraft will go out into space to basically explore this stellar anomaly and of course come back to Earth after doing that job right there. And so for Ben Grimm, he will be the one to pilot that spacecraft for the entire mission. Now, we also kind of learn here that this is a joint operation. So NASA, but also the Storm Foundation. And of course, this brings in Johnny and Susan Storm. Now for Susan, she kind of controls all the different science stuff for the company. For Johnny, Johnny's out in Vegas right now as a casino owner. But either way, their family owns the entire foundation and working with NASA on this project. So of course, it was Susan who got Reed the job. Now, it does seem like everything is going well for our characters, but just like that, it begins to fall apart. You see, that is when you have Agent Wyatt Wingfoot walk into the office of Susan Storm to basically tell her that him and S.H.I.E.L.D. will officially take over their project. Here's the reason why, because they were just informed by National Space Agency that there's unusual energy when it comes to the stellar anomaly. And so, of course, they kind of feel like that's kind of dangerous for the entire nation. And so S.H.I.E.L.D. has to take over. And the thing is, the president says they have no choice. Their project now officially belongs to S.H.I.E.L.D. and also Wyatt Wingfoot here. Now, back to Ben Grimm. You have Ben Grimm right now heading over to the airport to pick up Susan and Johnny as they arrive at the airport. Except Johnny is already there. And you see, for Johnny, he pulls up next to Ben in a very nice car, where of course he also has this beautiful young lady with him as well to kind of show off what he can do. Got the ladies, got the car, got the money. Either way, it does lead into the two characters begin to drive their vehicles at one another to kind of see who at the very last second will chicken out. And of course, it was Johnny. And so for Johnny, he does feel a tad bit embarrassed here because you have been being able to show him up. And so you have been drive away. And of course, the girl Johnny brought with him is very upset with him. Now, once you do have Ben Grimm arrive at the airport, of course, he sees Susan. He's happy to see her. But then he's kind of like, hey, who are these other people? And of course, these are supposed S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. And this is Wyatt Wingfoot saying like, hey, Ben Grimm, I know everything about you as well. And so, of course, this leads into the moment where you have everybody be informed of the fact that Reed Richards is no longer in charge of the project, that basically Washington has supposedly taken over the project. So now the entire thing belongs to them and Reed must go. Now that's when you have Reed find out that Susan and also Johnny are there. And for Susan, she does apologize because she had no idea about this happening. Now, you do have Ben Grimm be that hothead, right? And so with Ben Grimm being that hothead, he wants to fight against Wingfoot. But of course, he is stopped. But to Wingfoot, he looks at Reed and Ben as possible threats to his mission. So of course, they now have to get locked up. And so while you do have Ben and Reed be taken away, for Johnny and Susan, they're being forced to input the last launch codes into Command 1. Command 1 is a spacecraft that's being used on this mission to go out into space. And so, of course, you do have Johnny and Susan do it. Now, you do have Susan and Johnny at the very last second try to stop everything. But you didn't have Wingfoot say like, that's not going to happen. And so just like that, Johnny and Susan are also now prisoners. But here's the thing, because we do learn here that Wingfoot and all these other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are not technically S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. They all work for Victor Von Doom. And so here comes Dr. Doom in this pocket dimension that was created by, well, Franklin Richards. Now, for Ben and also Reed, they're trying to figure out like what exactly is going on here when it comes to S.H.I.E.L.D. taking over the entire project. Now, you do have Ben realize they're getting the spacecraft ready for space travel. They're trying to figure out like what are they plotting to do here? Like, is there some kind of trouble with the anomaly out in space? Or are they trying to just blow it up for unknown reasons? Like, what is the actual goal for these guys? Now, for Ben and also Reed, they realized that Susan and Johnny were able to break away from the guards who were trying to escort them over to another cell. And so for Johnny and Susan, once they were able to get rid of the guards, they let Reed and Ben go as well. So all four characters are now free. But now their goal is to stop Command 1 from being able to just destroy the space anomaly. Now, luckily for our heroes, there is the prototype aircraft that should allow our heroes to also go into space and hopefully stop Command 1 from blowing up the space anomaly. So this kind of leads into us seeing our heroes watching Command 1 just take off. And so, of course, with Command 1 now taking off, it's now time for our heroes to use the prototype as a way to follow Command 1 and to hopefully stop it. And so you do have our heroes being able to get into Project 1 and take off right after Command 1. And it's kind of cool because you're seeing our heroes right now being heroes before they officially become the Fantastic Four. And so while you do have our heroes being able to get out of space, they do see Command 1 heading towards the space anomaly. And so this kind of leads into the birth of the Fantastic Four, because you do have the fake S.H.I.E.L.D. agents on Command 1 go ahead and drop the nukes they had on the Command 1 into the space anomaly, hoping to get rid of it. Here's the thing though, before they did that, it did seem like something was coming through the space anomaly, like some kind of person possibly. But unfortunately, you have the nukes drop on the space anomaly, and of course, you now have radiation everywhere. And so all that radiation begins to hit the prototype. Now for Reed, he does inform us the prototype does not have the shields like Command 1 has to protect them from the radiation. And so for our heroes, they're literally being hit with a huge amount of radiation all at once. Now, for our heroes, they do try their best to get into escape pods, which they are able to do, but their spacecraft, the prototype, it does crash back on Earth. But now we have to transition over to Bermuda Triangle, and we pick up with Johnny Storm. And Johnny is the first one to discover his brand newfound ability. He's now officially the Human Torch. Now, once you do have Johnny find a way to, put out the fire, he does find this stretch out body. And of course, it is Reed Richards. Now, for Johnny and Reed, they are quickly able to figure out how their newfound powers technically work. But for Reed, he has to find the prototype's black box because he wants to kind of figure out what exactly happened up there and what in the world was going on with that space anomaly. Now, for a brief moment, we do pick up with Ben Grimm. And unfortunately, even in this dimension, you have Ben Grimm slowly turning into, the Thing. Now, we do finally pick up with Susan. And when we do, it's really more Susan finding the quantum drive. Here's the problem though. The containment shell for the quantum drive has been damaged by the impact. And so of course, right now, if it does hit critical mass, the entire island is going to blow up. And so for Susan, she has to find the rest of the crew. And the first person she finds is Ben Grimm. And let me say right now, Ben Grimm, man, by Jim Lee, looks amazing. Now, at first, she does freak out until you have Ben say like, hey, it's me. But then out of nowhere, our two characters have been taken hostage. And so this kind of leads us into basically Reed and Johnny trying to find Susan and also Ben. Now they heard the screams of both Susan and Ben. And so when they run over to that location, they fall into this hole where they're surrounded by all of these creatures. You already tell, what is this going to lead into? Now, while you do have these creatures carry Johnny and Reed over to a particular location, they see all of these different markings. Now, some of these markings Reed saw earlier when he came to that anomaly out in space, the wormhole in the middle of that anomaly. But they do find Ben and Susan. And this is the point where you do have Susan realize she has some kind of ability, but you also have Ben realize how strong he truly is now because you do have this huge creature appear, right? And you do have Ben and Susan begin to work together to kind of fight against the creatures. And luckily for them, you also have Johnny and Reed jump into the battle. Now for our heroes, they also see the quantum drive. And this is where you have Susan tell Reed like, hey, listen, we got to find a way to shut down the quantum drive because if we don't, it's going to blow up and we're all going to die. But then out of nowhere, you have our heroes be stopped by, their first actual villain in this brand new reality. And that would be the Moleman. And that just wraps up the first issue of this series. And so as we dive into the second issue of this series, we're really picking up with Johnny Storm believing that he has the ability to take down the Moleman by himself. And so, of course, it's Johnny kind of learning very quickly here that things are not going to be that easy for him. And so just like that, you have the Moleman being able to easily take down Johnny Storm. Now, right after that happens, and so this kind of leads into Reed Richard realizing like, okay, it's time for us to get the heck out of here. And so for Reed, he realized that these people, these creatures have been underground for a good amount of time. And so of course, any amount of light will basically blind them. But if you were able to give them a huge amount of light all at once, that should give you even more time to basically escape because that amount of light right there will basically blind them for a long period of time. And so you have Reed tell Ben, hey, look, Ben, right there is a pile of diamonds. Go ahead, pick them up. Bam, just like that. Then you have Susan use her powers as a way to guide light towards the diamonds. With her doing that, bam, a huge amount of light just hits the entire area. And so, of course, you didn't have our heroes being able to get away from the Moleman and also his creatures as well. Now, while you have our heroes being able to escape, you also have our heroes being able to shut down the quantum drive as well. So just like that, the island is not going to blow up. But then comes another problem, because then our heroes are taken out by somebody else. Now, when it comes to Jim Lee, I kind of feel bad about his writing sometimes because our heroes don't get a break. Here's the reason why I'm saying that. Because our heroes had just fought against fake S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who were technically working for Dr. Doom. Then they got their abilities. Then they had to fight against Moleman. Now it's time for them to get into the next storyline. And of course, that would be Namor. And so you have Namor right now getting involved because when it comes to Atlantis, they're basically losing people left and right. And the reason why, because, well, oil keeps spilling into their areas of the ocean. And so, of course, the Atlantean people are just dying off left and right. And so once you do have somebody show Namor another person dying thanks to the oil spill in the ocean, he's kind of like, you know what? Enough's enough. It's now time for me to have a conversation with the surface dwellers. And so this now leads us back over to our heroes. Now for our heroes, they have been captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. Now Reed Richards, he already realized where they're at. Not realized they've been captured by S.H.I.E.L.D., but he realized that they're basically prisoners and they're being observed by somebody. But of course, they cannot see their observers. And so you have our heroes try to work together to basically escape. Now, once they do learn very quickly here that one, they're on the helicarrier for S.H.I.E.L.D., and two, they're basically in the air. So you do have a few S.H.I.E.L.D. agents being able to grab our heroes and bring them back over to, well, Nick Fury. Now, when it comes to Nick Fury, he's able to easily realize that our heroes are basically innocent. Like, our heroes did not have a hand in what happened in the opening pages of this storyline when it came to Wyatt Wingfoot and those fake S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Now, while you have Nick talking to our heroes, Namor is basically making his move and currently attacking New York City. And so for our heroes, they decide to go ahead and help out S.H.I.E.L.D. to fight against Namor and his army of people. And so this kind of leads into a brief moment where we do see our heroes change into their Fantastic Four outfits. Now, with them doing that, you then have Susan go out of her way to remove the S.H.I.E.L.D. symbols on their outfits and replace them with the Fantastic Four logo by using tape. And so just like that, we now have the birth of the Fantastic Four. And their first mission as a superhero team is to go after Namor. And so this kind of leads into the ending of today's video, because once you do have our heroes arrive in New York City to battle against Namor, at first, it does seem like our heroes might be able to go toe-to-toe with him, but unfortunately, they can't. And so we do see Namor go out of his way to call in one of his sea creatures to make things even harder for our heroes. Now, we're going to stop here. And here's the reason why. Because, like I said earlier, when it came to Heroes Reborn, you really had all these different books kind of tie in with one another. And so, of course, now we have to jump over to Avengers issue number 1. And of course, in the Heroes Reborn pocket dimension. With that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.